Well, as promised, we are getting back to business, getting back to our regular routine starting today. But firstly, I want to thank all of you for your encouraging words after the last video. And I also want to say thank you for sticking around while I took a week off to regroup. Today, though, is an interesting story that happened in a small town in Alabama. I thought this one would get us back into the routine with a bang. In 2013, just what, 6 years ago now, a 65-year-old Vietnam veteran boarded a Dale County school bus. He shot and killed the bus driver and took a 5-year-old little boy hostage. Today I am in Midland City, Alabama, and I'm going to be telling the story of the 7-day-long Midland City hostage crisis. It's going to be epic.
You'll never see, because they're so sensitive. The greatest artist in the world.
Witnesses tell WSFA 12 News the man boarded the bus, shot the driver several times, and grabbed a 5-year-old passenger who is now being held hostage.
A 5-year-old boy held hostage in a bunker.
Midland City has a population of about 2,500 people. That's it. It's very, very small. These small towns like this are just places you don't expect some of these horrible things to happen. Just a few years back in 2013, it did happen here to this small town, and it's an incredible story. You can see this building here on the corner. This is their police department, their fire department, and ambulance service all in one. There's a sign right here in front of it. That is it. That is all the police department they have here in Midland City. It was the year 2000, 19 years ago now. A 65-year-old decorated Vietnam War veteran moved here to Midland City, right here on this property right behind me. It became very apparent to the residents that live all near here that that decorated war veteran, whose name was Jimmy Lee Dykes, he was struggling with reality and his mental capacity, and he needed help. He mostly kept to himself. He began living in isolation. He once told some of the neighbors that live around here that he had a daughter. He lost contact with her. Obviously, by the time the events that happened here happened, she was an adult. Things started spiraling out of control for Jimmy Dykes. He was arrested not far from here, across the state line into Florida, for brandishing a firearm, pulling out a firearm in public. Later on, he was also arrested again for marijuana possession. At one point, he started betting on horse races. He got so into betting on horse races that he kept books on it. He would write down information about the horses, their names, their races, their ages, their wins and losses. He was sure that there was a series of winners, that he could break a code and figure out who all the winners were going to be. He also thought that the government was out to get him. He thought that the government was involved in the horse racing, that they were enabling like a switch and which would enable a microchip inside of the horses, causing the horses that he would pick to win to lose. Now, he thought the government was working with the mafia to control the dogs, which is, you know, that's just ridiculous already. His neighbor said after he received those marijuana possession charges, he started changing. He became more hostile towards everyone. One day, a neighbor's dog wandered onto his property. He beat that neighbor's dog with an iron pipe. The neighbor's dog did not survive. He beat it to death for nothing more than the dog wandered onto his property here. After schools would let out, he would stand right here by the road and yell at the kids as they would walk by after being let off the bus or as they were walking home. He would yell at them to stay off his property. They better not come onto his property. There were times where neighbors would see him out at all times of the night with a shotgun and a flashlight, patrolling his property here to make sure no one stepped foot onto his property. One time, he became so irate with people who were just driving so fast down the road here that he took it upon himself and constructed a homemade speed bump right out here on the city street, right behind my car, right here in front of his property, so that people would have to slow down. Obviously, the city didn't let that stand for long. His neighbor said that they could see over time his paranoia grow and his grip on reality skewing farther and further out of control. On January the 28th of 2013, he was due in court for charges that he fired a gun at several of his neighbors. He never showed up to court that day, and less than 24 hours later, he would begin a 7-day standoff with police that left 2 people dead and turned the state of Alabama on its head.
12 feet underground in Midland City, Alabama, a madman is holding a hostage a 5-year-old boy with autism named Ethan. The bunker they're in is wired with explosives. Above ground, the nation's attention has been captured by the events in this small, close-knit community.
We do begin this evening with that standoff playing out in a small town in Alabama.
Just after 3:30 p.m. on January the 29th of 2013, Jimmy Dykes stepped onto a Dale County school bus, just like this one, that stopped here near his house. The driver of the school bus was actually an acquaintance of his named Charles Poland. He climbed onto the bus, telling his friend Charles Poland that he wanted to take 2 children from the bus. Charles Poland knew Jimmy Dykes' mental status, and he absolutely refused to let Jimmy take any of the kids. He stood up and stepped between Jimmy and the aisle that goes down the center of the bus and continued arguing with him that Dykes was not taking any kids off of that bus.
Do it. I don't want to shoot now. I don't want to shoot. They won't be hurt if you stick with that.
I cannot risk the kids.
Even after Jimmy Dykes pulled out a firearm and pointed it at Poland, telling him to move and get out of the way, Charles Poland didn't move and again refused to let Jimmy near the children. Jimmy Dykes then fired 5 shots into Charles Poland, killing him instantly right there on the bus in front of all the kids. He stepped over Poland's lifeless body and grabbed the first child he saw. That child was 5-year-old Ethan Gilman. Investigators never found any connection between the two. The authorities pretty much deducted that he just chose Ethan at random. After Jimmy Dykes pulled 5-year-old Ethan Gilman from the bus, all of the young students that were left on the bus, sitting there with Charles Poland's dead body laying on the floor, in a panicked fear, they stepped over Charles Poland's body to get out of the bus. And I mean, just think about it. Some of those kids probably knew Charles Poland as a bus driver because for many years, he probably carried them back and forth from home to school and from school to home for years and years and years. They probably knew him personally. They watched him die, and then those kids had to step over his dead body to leave the bus, to get out of that situation. I can't imagine what was going through their heads. After the kids exited the bus, it was then when the first 911 call came in, and it was from a 15-year-old student who was on that bus, Trey Watts. He was sitting at the rear of the bus and watched the entire thing unfold.
911, where's your emergency?
I don't know, we're on the bus and someone's trying to take our kids.
Oh my gosh, what's going on?
What's up,
What?
What's happened, Dad?
Oh my gosh. Hang in there, baby. Hang in there. Just get down. Get down. What's he doing now, honey? He took a kid. He got a kid.
Jimmy Dykes left that scene with 5-year-old Ethan Gilman, brought him back here to his property, and barricaded them both inside a 6-foot by 8-foot underground bunker that he had buried here on his property. After he got them barricaded into the bunker, Dykes himself called 911, told them that Ethan Gilman was alive and well, and he told them how they could communicate with him, which was via a PVC pipe that was sticking up out of the ground that was his ventilation system inside of the bunker. So the pipe came up and I guess brought fresh air into the bunker. That was how they were to communicate with him while he held Ethan Gilman hostage.
911.
Yes, get back. I have a hostage.
I got the suspect on the phone.
And I'm in an underground bunker.
Yes, sir.
When the cops get here, they stop at the front gate and
Yep.
they talk to a white post, a white PVC pipe sticking up. I'm sorry I had to shoot that bus driver. I told them there wouldn't be any harm to anybody, and there will not be any harm to the kids. But I'm going to say something, and I won't be talking on the phone anymore.
Within minutes, FBI negotiators from Dothan, which is not too far from here, arrived here on the scene. They immediately began communicating with Dykes. One of his first requests was medicine for Ethan because Ethan suffered from Asperger's syndrome and he had severe ADHD. Of course, that's something that the police quickly obliged. They also sent down coloring books and crayons to keep Ethan busy and keep his mind off of what was going on. During the next 7 days, FBI negotiators and Jimmy Dykes went back and forth. They had snuck in a hidden camera down into the bunker without Dykes' knowledge. Exactly 7 days after Jimmy Dykes shot and killed Charles Poland on the bus and took 5-year-old Ethan Gilman at 3:12 p.m. on February the 4th of 2013, an FBI SWAT team who had been watching that hidden camera, they saw Jimmy Dykes become more erratic. They watched him on camera pick up grenades and point his Ruger pistol at himself and at Ethan. At the same time, the FBI negotiations had hit a stalemate. So the FBI SWAT team was given orders to breach the bunker. They used their hidden camera to know where Ethan was at all times. And through that PVC pipe that they had been communicating with Jimmy Dykes on for the last 7 days, they tossed stun and flash grenades. At the same time as those grenades were going down the tube, they detonated explosives that they had attached to the roof of that bunker to give them access inside. As soon as the explosives detonated and the flashing and stun grenades went off, a firefight began between FBI and Jimmy Dykes. Jimmy Dykes was shot and killed by that FBI SWAT team. And Ethan Gilman's 7-day ordeal was finally over.
A hotbed of activity behind me, and I can now report, according to a source with the Dale County Sheriff's Office, that this standoff is now over.
The tense national drama is over. A 5-year-old boy is free, rescued after all those days held hostage in a bunker. His captor is dead.
Ethan Gilman was immediately taken to Southeast Medical Center in Dothan, Alabama, and he was actually given a clean bill of health. He was not injured at all. It turns out Jimmy Dykes had been cooking for him and feeding him and taking care of him. He had not hurt him at all. Almost exactly 1 week after the standoff, the local authorities came here and demolished all traces of the bunker and Jimmy Dykes' property, where Ethan Gilman was held against his will for 7 days. As you can see, the property sits here now overgrown, and it's set this way ever since then. It hasn't been touched since then. Well, since being held captive, Ethan Gilman was adopted. He was in the foster care system just prior to the whole ordeal. His last name was changed to Turner, and as of right now, he is actually enjoying life. I believe he's probably in the 6th grade, somewhere in Abbeville, Alabama. The 7-day standoff between the police and Jimmy Dykes resulted in 2 lives being lost. Charles Poland, the bus driver, and then Jimmy Dykes himself. That was it. Not only were 2 lives lost though, it turned a state upside down. Nothing like that had really ever happened here before. And it also changed a little boy's life forever. That is the story of the Midland City, Alabama standoff. I hope you enjoyed this episode. To me, this was an interesting one. I want to thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Again, we're back into into our normal schedule. If you would like to help support the channel and all of our future travels and future stories, check out the links down in the description box below. There's like 3 of them down there. Check them out, and if not, that's okay too. I just appreciate you watching. Thank you all so much. I will see you again tomorrow. I hope you have a great day.
The greatest artist in the world.